In today's video, we'll talk about my settings for my Mavic Pro. First of all, someone asked that below my last video, which will be linked up here. And if you haven't seen that, definitely watch it before watching this one, so you understand what kind of setting I was filming in. But now let's jump right into it. I'll make another video about my settings for the A6000, but this one is just for the Mavic Pro. So I have kind of two settings to suggest. The first one being a very simple one if you want to have a less stressful workflow and you just want to have pretty footage which you can use right off the bat, then I'd suggest using the settings I'll tell you right now. For a kind of more easy workflow, I'd film in the picture profile DCine-like. That's just the standard DJI drone profile, so it's not flat or something, but there's some kind of contrast and saturation in it, so it just looks more pleasing when comparing it to log or something like that. So it's just easier to work with and looks better without color grading. Then I'd suggest shooting in 2.7K because 4K is just has bigger file sizes and it has not as good low light as 2.7K, so you might have to do some noise reduction, which is very annoying. I can tell you it's not fun, definitely not fun. Then next up, sharpening, contrast and saturation. These are the three settings you can dial in with the DJI drones, except from the Mavic Air 2 and the Mavic Mini, I think. I don't know why they don't put this in the app they're using for these drones, because it's very handy, but nonetheless in all the other drones I think you can adjust that. So for my Mavic I use +1 sharpening, because with 0 sharpening or less it introduces a lot of bad noise reduction, so the footage in trees kind of looks mushy at sometimes, which I don't like. I tried it at first because DJI's footage is very over sharpened, I think, so it would be good to unsharpen it right in camera, but I did this and filmed trees and I just couldn't find any detail because the noise reduction in the camera, in the drone, sorry, that was my alarm clock, just the noise reduction wasn't good at all. Next up, contrast and saturation I would both set to -1, because with contrast to -1 you just get a bit more dynamic range, even though you're not using log, and saturation -1, that's just a personal preference, as I think the footage looks better when it's not that saturated. White balance depends on the setting, but the last video was filmed during golden hour or sunset, so I'd suggest filming between white balance 8000 Kelvin and 8500, which might seem a lot higher than you might think, but it's just what I like and it just feels very warm and comfy. Next up, if you want the highest quality from your Mavic Pro or any other Mavic, except from the, as I said, Mavic Mini and Mavic Air 2, but you can still set a picture profile on the Mavic Air 2, I think, then you should definitely go with this one. So resolution 4K, because that's just the highest resolution you can get in a Mavic. Unless you want slow motion for some sport shots, then definitely go with full HD with 120 frames or so, but I would suggest shooting in 4K. I like 25 frames a second, some like 24, that's up to you. but I shoot 4K 25 frames a second because I think it looks the best, and you can just crop in, which I do a lot when shooting with my Mavic, just because I like a tighter focal length, and it just kind of feels more like a tighter one if you zoom in, even though it's digitally. Next up, picture profile D-Log, because if you have the time on your hands and the knowledge or a lot to color grade your footage from your Mavic, then definitely go with D-Log, because it just offers you way more flexibility in post to tweak the highlights, for example, because in D-Cine-like it looks kind of pretty right out of camera, but there's not as much dynamic range, so there's a lot of information lost. When using D-Log, it's not like RAW or something, but it's way better because it's just really flat. Then sharpening again, +1. Unless you're not filming something with great detail, then go with -1, I'd say, because then there is not this over sharpening which DJI does, so just to note here. And contrast and saturation, both again -1. I tried putting contrast to -3 before, but with the Mavic Pro Series 1, so 50 or 60 megabits per second, even in 4K, it doesn't really work, because it's just too less information to work with, and it just can't handle the extreme adding contrast in post. So I'd suggest leaving it at -1, so you have a bit more dynamic range, but it's still handling it kind of fine when you tweak it in post, because if you make it too flat, it just falls apart completely. So that's it for this video. Very handy, I think. If you have any more questions, hit me up in the comments. If you want a tutorial on how to dial it in the app, then just type it below in the comments, leave a like and a subscription, and I see you next time. Bye!